Ukrainian President Zelensky and European leaders are scrambling to revive talks on Ukraine's future. Here with me now for the latest is the White House National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. Thank you so much for being here, sir. I want to ask for your view on what the Ukrainian president said after that Oval Office meeting. He repeatedly went online. He thanked the U.S. and President Trump for the help that the U.S. is giving, saying it is crucial to have the president's support, that no one wants peace more than we do. Is that enough for President Trump to get things back on track?
Nope.
Well, the president took calls from Prime Minister Starmer yesterday. He's also taken a call from Prime Minister Meloni of Italy. President Zelensky is with those European leaders now. Those European leaders are talking to him directly about getting to the negotiation table. What does he need to see to actually negotiate with us and negotiate with the Russians, go to confidence building measures, go to a ceasefire, and bring this horrific war to an end? And what was so, I think, stunning to all of us in the Oval Office was that it was not clear Zelensky was going to go to negotiations at all, that he would ever be able to negotiate with Putin, and whether he shared our goal of ending this war. So what I made clear as Secretary Rubio, and I said, look, this cannot proceed, was that this was a huge missed opportunity for him and for his country. He could have left the White House on Friday on the heels of an engagement with President Macron of France, with Prime Minister Starmer.
I also think that there's a lot of people that are probably happy now that the EU is backing up Ukraine, because now it's like, basically, I think that the perspective is that this is the way I think a lot of voters here feel in the U.S. is that why are we putting all this money into it when the EU isn't putting enough money into it? Right? I mean, and again, I'm not trying to repeat that shit about how we paid more money than the EU did or anything else, but I'm saying that's the way that people see it.
The United Kingdom, where they were talking about European boots on the ground, security guarantees for Ukraine, a positive movement towards ending this war, and having Ukraine and the United States being bound together for a generation economically. But what we made clear was that could not proceed, at least for now. And President Trump said in his announcement on X, when President Zelensky is ready to truly engage for peace, he's welcome back anytime.
So what does the president need? What does President Trump need? Does he need a public apology? Does he want a phone call? Can you be specific on how to make that happen?
Well, it wasn't clear to us that President Zelensky was ready to negotiate in good faith towards an end to this war. For us, talking about the details and demands of security guarantees before, as President Trump said, look, I don't know that we can get both sides of the table at this point. And, you can't kind of trash the other side litigating through the history of this conflict if we're going to bring both sides to the table.
Yeah, he's right about that.
And so coming to the Oval Office, with the body language, the shaking of head, the kind of the arms crossed, we found it incredibly disrespectful. We were ready to sign that deal. I want to address directly that this was some type of ambush is absolutely false. We had negotiated the minerals deal in the weeks prior. It was difficult, but it was done and finalized and ready to be signed in the East Room.
So since you've been talking about his body language and his...
So they had that shit all planned out? All that got burned up. Wow. That's nuts.
His approach. I do want to ask about your view of Volodymyr Zelensky, because right after the Ukraine war happened, after Russia invaded Ukraine, to be more specific, you were on CNN and you called Zelensky a 21st century Churchill because of how he was leading the fight against Russian tyranny. And yesterday you called him, or at least you compared him to an ex-girlfriend who wants to argue everything that you said 9 years ago rather than moving forward. Is that really how you see it now? And do you see it all?
I'm not saying Zelensky's like that, but like, fucking based. It's fucking funny. That's
the
funny.
perspective that he was trying to put out there, which is that
Yeah.
he does not trust Vladimir Putin, and he feels that he needs some kind of security guarantee.
Well, Donna, I would also point out, if we want to do a history lesson on Churchill, that he stood and fought for his people. President Zelensky stood and fought for Ukraine. But Churchill was also voted out of office in 1945. He was a man for a moment, but he did not then transition England into the next phase. And it's unclear whether President Zelensky, particularly after what we saw Friday, is ready to transition to Ukraine to an end to this war and to negotiate and have to compromise.
Yeah.
And what President Trump said right there that day in the Oval Office is both sides are going to compromise here. He's made that clear to both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, but it did not appear to us that Zelensky was ready to go to peace.
Yeah.
So when he makes that clear to us, publicly and privately, that's the president is trying to end this war. He campaigned on it. He was elected on it. And that's going to take tough diplomacy. Who would criticize us? But you have members of Democrats that are criticizing us for dealing with the Russians, the same Democrats that had no problem dealing with the murderous Iranian regime in an Iran deal that was horrific, and used the Russians as intermediaries.
Can I just follow up?
I think you've got one of those senators coming on your show. So I
do think that a lot of that politics, it's always opportunistic, right? Every single time this shit's opportunistic.
So I'm finding the kind of hypocritical pearl clutching in Washington, D.C. to be a bit ridiculous.
Can I just follow up on what you said about Winston Churchill? Because it is interesting. He was definitely a man for the moment during World War II. Are you suggesting that President Trump wants Zelensky to resign?
We need a leader.
I think that he's putting pressure on Zelensky and bringing up the language of Zelensky resigning in order to weaken Zelensky's position with his people, in order to make Zelensky more willing to come to the table to make a deal. Like, if I was Trump, that's what I would do. So it's a second order effect that lowers his power over his people.
Can deal with us. Eventually deal with the Russians.
It's a brutal tactic. It's a rat tactic for sure. But I'm saying that's what I think he's doing.
And in this war.
Same way I call him a dictator.
If it becomes apparent that President Zelensky's either personal motivations or political motivations are divergent from ending the fighting in his country, then I think we have a real issue on our hands. But look, Donna, let's ask ourselves, what is this war going to look like a year from now? The patience of the American people to keep giving billions and billions and billions with no end in sight is not unlimited. And we also made that clear to President Zelensky at the end of that meeting.
So you're saying he might be...
Is time on his side? Is time on the American people's side? What I'm saying is this war needs to end, and that's going to take...
And I think also it takes the American people against him whenever Trump calls him a dictator and says that he has a 4% approval rating and says that he won't hold elections, etc., right? Because those are all things that make him look bad in the eyes of the American people, that make people less supportive of Ukraine, that make Zelensky have less public pressure and public sentiment power by basically causing people to not support him, right? That's the reason why. Trump's a fucking liar, fake script, not gonna lie. I listen. That's what works. And I think it did work. I think it is working. It's working as we speak. It's working. So you can say that it's bad. You can say it's mean. You can say he shouldn't do that. True. But that's what he's doing. That is what he's doing. I think it is working. How does it work? Because a lot of people are viewing Ukraine. So I think this is a shift of opinion versus now versus maybe 2 years ago. There's been a very big shift in opinion. And I see this discussed a lot, where Ukraine, like basically the idea is that Zelensky wants to keep the war up in Ukraine because he doesn't want to have to do an election. And I think also Ukraine just wants the war to go on forever, and they want us to pay for it forever. And this is a very common sentiment that that the people in the US have. You can say what the fuck all you want. I don't agree with this. I'm saying this exists. That's retarded? Well, there's a lot of retards. So what the hell do you expect? What do you expect? It's ridiculous. Yeah. Imagine even thinking that. What the fuck, dude? Am I wrong? Am I wrong for accurately identifying that sentiment? Do you guys think that sentiment does not exist? No. You can say the sentiment is wrong, but me saying that it exists is not fucking wrong. What an ally you are. You get invaded and we make you look bad so your enemy wins. People just don't get it. 100% exists. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, like that's what's going on.
Concessions on territory. That's going to take Russian concessions on security guarantees.
Yeah.
That's going to take all sides coming to the table, and we are working very hard to drive those negotiations forward. We had our engagement in Riyadh with the Russians. We are working to have an engagement.
Why chat's so emotional? Chat's emotional because they think that it's completely unfair that Ukraine is having to give up land. They're having to give up their identity. They're having to give up their autonomy, all because Russia wants to invade their country. Because like you have to look at it from the perspective, like a lot of people now, Russia, it is unfair. And the reality is that Ukraine doesn't have the negotiating power that Russia and the United States do. Things are not equal. Russia is more powerful than Ukraine, and the United States is more powerful than both of them. So Ukraine doesn't matter as much in the negotiations, and what they want doesn't matter as much. Straight up, that's how it is. And you can say that's horrible. That's the way it shouldn't be. This is the way that diplomacy has worked and wars have worked for thousands of years. It doesn't work the way it should work. It works the way it does work.
We thought
That's
a deal with the Ukrainians, and then we'll bring all sides together. That only President Trump can do that. And I find it incredulous.
Somebody says what actually matters? The ability to have force and the ability to exercise that force in a precise manner. If Russia didn't have nuclear weapons and Russia didn't have the military that it did, the entire conversation would be different. The only thing that matters ultimately is power, violence, and the ability to exercise that violence. That is what really, at the end of the day, matters.
He's being criticized for that.
You just mentioned a
That's
specific concession, potentially, that you would like Vladimir Putin to make. Can you elaborate on that? Because we haven't heard any specifics before.
Well, we can't get any specifics from the Ukrainians, but this will clearly be some type of territorial concession for security guarantees going forward. I mean, that has been discussed in previous rounds of
security
negotiations,
guarantee from
and we
the
think
US?
that is a broader framework.
Who guarantees that security?
Well, right now, some first principles. This needs to be a permanent end, not a temporary end. This needs to be European-led security guarantees going forward. Part of that is Europe's contribution to its own defense, so it has the capability to do so. We've had both the United Kingdom and France talking about their troops on the ground going forward. And then, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. What type of support we provide or not is to be negotiated. But one thing is clear, we do not see Ukraine being a member of NATO, because that would automatically drag U.S. troops in.
That's totally off the table. There's no way that happens. Like, in my opinion, I feel like every other country that they add in NATO increases the probability of this happening again. Russia would never accept it. Yeah, exactly. It's like instant World War III. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. U.S. already gave security guarantees back when Ukraine gave away its nukes. These kind of mean fuck all. In like, what was that, 1993, I think? Or 94, something like that.
But Donna, you know, look, we need to get all sides of the table, and we're very frustrated that we did not see that from the Ukrainians after we had negotiated a minerals deal that would bind us together, grow their economy, and change the nature of our aid so that the American taxpayer could recoup
What
it.
are your conversations?
That was all done and ready to be signed on Friday.
What are your conversations like right now with the Russians in terms of reopening conversations and perhaps diplomatic normalization, embassies, and so forth?
Well, Secretary Rubio's team at a working level have met with the Russians about broadening our embassy operations. They were virtually shut down on all sides. We don't, I mean, it's just a practical matter and common sense. If we're going to drive these negotiations forward, our embassies have to be operable. Those conversations are happening, and we're also having conversations about how they will end and what they need to see to end this war. There will obviously be differences on all sides, and the United States, through shuttle diplomacy and the leadership of President Trump, will drive forward to bridge those gaps. Our point is, you know, talking about the fine details of security guarantees is like talking about the details of a warranty before you know if you're going to buy the thing. We're driving both sides to the negotiating table, and yet people are trying to put the cart before the horse.
And last question, there are reports that the Trump administration, you are talking about pausing offensive cyber operations against Russia. Is that true?
That has not been part of our discussions. There will be all kinds of carrots and sticks to get this war to an end.
All right. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't see how this ends without Ukraine giving up
Tom.
land and giving up a bunch of shit, to be honest. I don't see how it ends. It's not a good answer. Yeah, the interview was like not super great. There's the video right there. What was that response? Yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of non-answers, right? Very, very, very common non-answers. Yeah, it doesn't end without that. Yeah, that's how power dynamics work. Exactly. And yeah, sorry, but the USA guarantees are not worth jack shit unless you put soldiers there. Yeah, but like, I don't think that Americans, like, personally, do I want to put soldiers in Ukraine to defend Ukraine? No. No. It's too much. EU's already doing it? Yeah. EU's already doing it. Now, there could be a point if things escalate like way higher and way bigger, then maybe that would be an option. But at this current point, no. Do you think Europeans should? I don't know. It's not my problem. Yeah, I have no idea. But you asked Ukraine to give up their nukes in 1993 in return for support. Here's the problem that you have, and this is something that I've been trying to explain, is that you're not going to get a 30-year-old voter to commit to giving away and signing away their future because of an original sin that was committed before they existed. Ultimately, if you are 27 or 30 years old, this deal happened before you existed. Or let's say you're 40 years old. This deal happened whenever you were 10 years old. You didn't sign this deal. You didn't have anything to do with this deal. And the idea that you want to sign away, you know, multiple like people to die and billions of dollars for something that you had nothing to do with, that's not going to happen. Now, whether you think that's a good or a bad decision doesn't matter. Trash take? I think in a lot of ways it is a trash take. You're right. I think you're right. But I still think they think that. It's just the truth. It is. Yeah, that's just the way it is. Is trash, but it's reality? Yeah. So there's no treaty in the world that would work for 20 years if people don't want to honor it? Yeah, it's about right. Yeah. If there's enough pressure and position, then people would just ignore it. Yeah. I'd say maybe 30, maybe a little bit longer, but yeah. Countries have integrity. Integrity is something that some people can't afford. And I think that people are dramatically downplaying the average day-to-day struggles that American citizens have. And by downplaying them, I think that what they do is they end up doing a disservice to the problem. Yeah, people don't care about integrity. They don't care about any of this stuff. They just want to have their money go to their taxes, their tax money go to their people. That's it. It was made back then because people were freaked out about nukes. The new generation didn't have to deal with it, thought it isn't going to care about it. Yeah, I don't think so. So if that was your opinion on this, what would you say if Putin, if Russia decided to push further to make the Soviet Union real again? I think that you could mobilize American citizens to be okay with fighting back against Russia if they invaded a NATO country. But I think unless they invaded a NATO country, then you couldn't get American citizens to go along with it. That's like my pulse check of like kind of what I think the difference would be. Yeah, it's Europe's try, and I think that even then it would be a very hard sell. Yeah, Russian wouldn't care. Americans don't care. Yeah, I think that again, Americans are very much, and I think there's also another issue where, and this goes back to like the military spending. I think there's a big issue that a lot of Americans have is that they see a lot of Europeans that live, you know, they have free healthcare and they have a bunch of these other things. And one of the reasons why they have these things is because, at least this is the perception that a lot of people have, is that America gives them security guarantees and ensures that other countries won't invade them and effectively protects them. So they see these countries in Europe that are living with this higher standard of living, and they have like more like entitlement programs, etc. What? No. I mean, and that's 1,000% true. Okay. All right. Okay. Don't shoot the messenger. There's a lot of people that think that. Not 100% bad. I'm telling you, like, guys, it's not just a perception, it's the truth. It doesn't matter whether it's the truth or not. Yeah, so it's literally just factual, like this is it. And so a lot of people feel this way, and they think that Europe is able to enjoy a higher degree of living, and they're able to have these entitlement programs because they're not spending all of this money on the military that the U.S. is. And so I think this is a growing resentment that Americans have towards Europeans. And I think that resentment is kind of like being tested now with how many Americans are okay with the Europeans taking over the responsibility for Ukraine. That's how it is. Wrong? Dumb take? Okay. That's what people think. Yeah, that's what people think. That's it. Yeah, are you feeling this way, or where's this statement coming from? I think there's probably like an element of truth to it, but I don't think it's like super true. I think actually Europe just has way higher taxes, and they also have standing militaries as well. I think also the U.S. spends way too much on its military because it's been captured by the military-industrial complex. So I think in like a pie graph, right? Like, yeah, sure, there's like a slice, but it's not a huge slice. Like that's my opinion on it. So yeah. And there might be like a couple other things that I'm not thinking of. As ambassador, all the people and can speak for the average person. I'm not speaking for the average person. I'm just trying to. My intention is always to understand how people think and how they feel, and in doing so, that helps me understand what's going to happen. Right? Like that's my goal. Like that's what I always like being able to do, is understanding how people think. And like being able to identify what that thinking is and then figure out why that thinking is the way it is. And I know some people might disagree with that, or you might not like the outcomes of that, but that is fundamentally what my idea is. That's very annoying. Yeah, and also, as one speaks for many Americans, yeah, I do think that I speak for a lot of people. But you're basically saying that the U.S. just decided to forget the fact that EU backed the U.S. in their wars. I mean, like, you talking about like with like Iraq or something? I'm not sure like what you mean by that. Specifically, barely. Yeah, I don't think that American citizens care about that because they think that it's something that's extremely minimal. And also they viewed that as like also like the threat of like extremism and terrorism is something that everybody was responsible for dealing with, and not just the U.S., right? And so because we were retaliating for September 11th, that's one thing, but also this stuff could have happened to Europe as well. And so, like, I don't know about how much money was spent over there in Europe and, like, the Iraq War and, like, the Middle East wars, but it probably wasn't that much compared to the U.S. Pretty sure we bailed them out of World War II. Yeah, definitely. Average human doesn't understand what they think themselves and why. What chance do they have of understanding what someone else thinks? Well, I mean, I think it's still something you should try to do, right? I feel like it should be. Yeah, that's what I would say. Chat's fucking retarded. Well, the thing is that, again, I think it's just like a really hot topic for people, right? Yeah, it's just an extremely hot topic, and people are like really opinionated about it, and that's really what it comes down to. So there's no reason to get upset about it. I mean, like, I know people in chat get mad about stuff, but I really think this is how people are looking at it. Now, I could be wrong, but it's basically my job to look at sentiment for stuff, right? Like, you think about it, it's like one thing that I spend all of my time doing, and that's where I'm reading. That's what I'm seeing. I'll be right back. Give me a second.